Welcome back to r/neighbors from hell, where people share stories about their crazy neighbors. And if you're new to my channel, please don't forget to subscribe to join our amazing community. And without any further ado, let's dive right into the stories. The first one is titled "Neighbor Used My Property as a Landfill." An important thing to remember for this story is that I own multiple properties across the entire country. This one in particular was an empty lot that I'd been debating what to do with for a while. Circumstances that everyone has been aware of the last couple years made travel a little difficult, so I was not able to visit that property as often as I would have liked. Only recently was I able to make the journey there and begin my plans for what I was going to do with that land. I was going to build a beautiful house that I spent months working on the blueprints for. I was still debating living there or selling it, but the bottom line was that I had the entire thing planned out. The property had wonderful apple trees and a really good land for foundation. It was basically ideal, so I think everyone can imagine how mortified I was when I got back to find the entire place in total shambles. I was not expecting after 2 years for things to be perfect, and I knew that I was going to have to do some cleanup for the normal wear that happens, but I was met with something awful though, as it looked like my property had been used for basically a dumping ground. When I say it looked like a dump, I did not just mean there was trash and small things like cans around. There were giant pieces of scrap metal which looked like it came from broken cars all over the place. The cement foundation that I was going to use for the house was destroyed and unusable, as it looked like someone took a sledgehammer to it. There were also tools and other materials there that made it look like someone was using the space to do some work and did not care that they destroyed everything. The worst thing though was the trees. In addition to the apple trees, the land also had a few majestic oak trees and 2 dogwoods that were going to end up on either side of the front yard to make it look even more amazing. When I got there though, I did not see any of that, and instead I was met with dug up ground in the case of the apple and dogwood trees and ugly stumps in the case of the oaks. I was furious and wanted to find out who had been trespassing on and destroying my property. I did not know where to start, but I saw that the people across the street were home and nicely went up to try and get answers out of them. Me? Hello miss, I'm sorry to bother you, but I own the lot across the street from you. I have not been able to come around in a while, and I was wondering if you knew anything about the trees being destroyed and the trash everywhere on my property. She looked very confused before talking to me. Woman, I thought that lot belonged to neighbor, because he was always there doing things to it. I was wondering what he even had planned for it, but I thought he just had the land to be like a yard extension for work or something. I thanked the woman and went right up to the house and knocked, only to see a large man answer the door and look at me angry like I had just woken him up or something. Neighbor, what do you want? I don't want to buy nothing or join your church. Me? Actually, I own the lot next to you that you've been using and destroying. That was my property, and you cut down the trees and made a total mess, not to mention ruining the foundation. Neighbor? Well, you snooze, you lose. You were not here, so I decided that I was going to take advantage of the land. I needed somewhere for my scraps and to get my work done. Before I could say anything else, he promptly slammed the door in my face, making me even angrier. Now, I'm not usually a vengeful kind of guy, but if you get on my bad side, you better watch out. I was planning on being here for a while, and I was not going to let this guy push me around. So the first thing I did to let him know how serious I was consisted of paying for all the junk on my property to be taken away. I say junk like that because it also consisted of his tools and other things that he left on my property. If he wanted to play dirty instead of talking to me like an adult, I could too. He was so angry when he saw that his stuff was gone and threatened to sue me for theft. I told him that he could go right ahead and sue me because he was going to get a lawsuit soon about the cutting down of the trees and the destruction of the foundation. I know that some people might think I would not get anywhere with that case because I had no proof, but it turns out most people on the block hated him and were willing to tell the court that he was always in my lot doing these things. If that was not enough, something else that shot him in the foot, so to speak, was one look into his financial records that showed that he sold the wood from the trees that he cut down. A judge did not even want to hear him talk about how I had his stuff hauled away with the rest of the junk because he did not have permission to be there in the first place. Let alone doing work there without a permit or anything, which I think resulted in a hefty fine. I don't know exactly because I only cared about what was going on when it came to me and getting my property fixed. They created an estimate of the destroyed foundation and the trees worth to a sum that he was going to have to pay me. It honestly was not a lot, and after lawyer fees I only walked away with about $20,000, which was not actually enough to even cover getting new trees, having the old foundation fully removed and a new one being put in. It was still worth it though, and showed him that I was not one to mess with. I made sure to put a chain fence around the property while construction was going on, with a clear sign stating that trespassers would be arrested and property was being monitored by cameras. It actually wasn't, but neighbor was not going to be dumb enough to try again and get in even more trouble. So while the house is not going to be exactly like my original blueprints, I still think that what I'm going to build will be fantastic and wonderful. I even plan on having a permanent fence installed along with a row of tall bushes to block the view from neighbor for whoever ends up buying it and moving in. As for me, I think I'm just going to stay where I am now and relax knowing that I have one less property to worry about. I can only hope the next time I visit one after a long absence, it won't cause as much of a problem as this one did. And yeah, Ripe Stars, if your neighbor did something like this to your property while you were absent, what would you have done if you were in OP's shoes? Let us know in the comments, and while you're at it, I would really appreciate it if you could also like the video, because that would help my channel tremendously. Thank you so much in advance, your help is very much appreciated. The next one is titled, "Don't use my bin, you will regret it." So I had a new neighbor move in below me 2 months ago, and that was around the time I started to notice that my bins were almost always full when I would go to put my rubbish in the bins, which was seriously annoying. Plus he was dumping food waste into my blue recycling bin, and on more than one occasion this led to me being forced to travel in a car to my parents' house to put my rubbish inside their huge communal bin, because there was never any space in my own bins. Cue extreme frustration on a regular basis. So I did what any self-respecting British person would do and promptly called up my private landlord to complain about this and to ask why they did not have a bin of their own. To which the person on the phone proceeded to explain that a few years back someone living at the property below me had set fire to both of their bins, and neither they or my landlord had bothered to get them replaced, so when this new tenant moved in, he just found that he had no bins for his rubbish. Did he call the council to request some bins for himself? Did he knock on my door to at least have the courtesy to ask if he can use my bins until he gets some of his own? No, he just decided to use my bins as if they were his own, and he just assumed I would tolerate this. How wrong he was. So after my conversation with the people working at my landlord's office, they proceeded to send out letters to all the properties surrounding mine, because they apparently couldn't directly accuse my neighbor below without proof it was him doing it, giving everyone a stern warning that they should use their own bins and not others, and that it was frowned upon. A week goes by and my bin is still being used by the buffoon living below me, so I ring them up again and ask what they are going to do, because the letter has not had any effect, and once again I still cannot deposit my rubbish in my bin because it was full of someone else's crap again. They just proceed to give me the runaround, and long story short, they were all bark and no bite, and were not willing to get off their asses and fix the damn problem. So by this point it's been 2 months and I am thoroughly fed up with this, so I decide to take action. I contact my dad and we have a brainstorm and come up with a plan. Cue a drive to the local B&Q hardware store to buy supplies and a drive to get his tools, and then back to my house to put the plan into action. We decide to cut a hole out of the top of the lid, and in the side of the bin on both bins we put a thick strong chain through the holes to secure the lids shut, and then bolted the chains together with a thick strong padlock on both bins. Take that, annoying neighbor. Now he is someone else's problem, and I finally have space for my own rubbish in my own bin. Peace has been restored and all is right in the world of bins. And by the way, I told this story to my sister, who laughed and thought what I did was overkill, but I disagree. What do you all think, lovely people of Reddit? Was my reaction a bit overboard or was it justified? I believe it was a necessary action that had to be taken, and now I can rest assured my bins are safe once more. And Ripe Stars, I'm curious, have any of your neighbors ever thrown their trash into your bins? Let us know in the comments if something like this ever happened to you before. And the next one is titled, Am I the a-hole for exposing my mother-in-law? I wanna preface this by saying that I, female 34, married my husband, male 37, a year ago. His mom is snoopy and annoying. She cannot help it, that is just how she is, as my dear in-laws say. My husband and I purchased a new house recently. My mother-in-law kept pushing to get an emergency key. She promised that she only would use it in an emergency, but given the fact that she had an emergency key to our old apartment and walked in on us being intimate twice, but my husband didn't think it was a big deal, I just could not trust her, so I just sent her a fake key after she kept pushing, and she had a smug look on her face after I hand delivered it to her. Days gone by, and on Christmas dinner, mother-in-law angrily called me out on the fact that I gave her a fake copy of the house key. She shamed me for doing this in front of everyone, but in my defense, I asked her how she found out, and she said days ago when she came over at 4 while my husband and I were out. I reminded her, didn't you promise you wouldn't use it unless there is an emergency? So you tried to get in when there was no emergency and you broke the promise you made to us. She looked red in the face and the other family started staring, and some even laughed at her for the face she made. She suddenly got up from her seat and rushed into the kitchen, where she had a huge meltdown so loud the next door neighbors must have heard. Literally, I've never heard a 60-plus-year-old woman throw a tantrum like that. Needless to say, dinner went awkward and my husband and his sister were giving me looks. My husband went off on me in the car and said I lied and manipulated and humiliated and exposed his mom, and said that he wouldn't have let me get away with it had he known. We had an argument and he is demanding I apologize to his mom for my childish behavior and for ruining Christmas dinner for the whole family. Am I the a-hole? And Ripe Stars, please let us know in the comments what you think about this story. Do you think that OP is the a-hole for not giving her husband's mother the key to her new house or not? In my opinion, she is definitely not the a-hole, because personally, I would surely not give a key to my new house to my mother-in-law, especially if she is a crazy one, seemingly like the one in this story. Anyway, a user in the comments said, not the a-hole, but your husband seems to have no problem of you being humiliated and shamed in front of people. He seems to have no regards to your need of privacy and dignity. Another person said, not the a-hole, number 1, you never owed her a key, she proved she is not trustworthy, and she is the one who decided to bring it up in front of other people. Play stupid games, win stupid prizes. Also, who is childish? A kid 1/10 of her age would have been embarrassed throwing tantrums like that. Also, your husband is an a-hole for not 100% having your back. He should never allow his family to cause a single problem for you, and definitely shouldn't expect you to be a doormat to his just no mom. Don't apologize, demand an apology from your mother-in-law and this useless husband of yours. The next one is titled, Be Nice to Delivery Drivers. I am working a seasonal gig delivering packages through the holidays. The other day I was delivering on a fairly busy road with very little parking. I'm not going to park a block away and walk up and down the block 3 times with the boxes for each house, because that would literally double my work time. So I parked in front of somebody's driveway for all of 2 minutes to deliver to her and her 2 neighbors. Nobody was trying to pull in or out, my vehicle was running with flashers on, and I was never out of sight of my vehicle. This lady came out of her house yelling at me about parking illegally and that I should not do that again, not because I was inconveniencing anyone, but just on principle and just generally being very rude about it. So today, when I had 4 more packages to deliver to her house, I purposefully put them in front of her screen door that opens out, so she will have to hit her packages with the door to get to them. And the next one is titled, Entitled Neighbor Tries to Hire My Cat. This is not nearly on the level as some of the stories on here, but it is still one of the most baffling experiences I've ever had. So this happened several years ago. I think I was about 12. We lived in a pretty quiet neighborhood with a pretty even mix of families and retirees. This story involves the latter. We had an indoor/outdoor cat, more indoor than out, named Tiger, who would roam for a couple hours every day and then spend the rest of his time indoors. My dad really disliked having a cat, but was not mean to him, save for calling him a dumbass every now and then. This relationship is mildly important later on. This lady lived across the street, and when me and my dad were walking toward the pond behind the neighborhood so I could catch frogs, she caught our attention as we passed. EB, which is actually the woman, the entitled neighbor.
Hey, does it get mice?
I was and kind of am incredibly shy, and my dad handled it. Dad, come again? EB.
The cat, does it hunt mice?
Dad, he's a cat, ma'am. He was probably picturing the number of presents Tiger had brought us throughout the years when he said this, so it was essentially a yes. EB.
Can I get him over here sometimes? I got mice.
She was still shouting. We really were not far away enough to justify it. Dad, he's a cat, ma'am. He's not gonna come catch a mouse for you. She rolled her eyes, complete with a pfft and a frustrated hand wave. We walked off when she went back into her house, and I caught 3 tadpoles which all died because F me, I guess. A few days later, Tiger did not come home from one of his outings. I'd been a strong advocate for not letting him outside because it was not safe, so immediately all of the worst case scenarios entered my brain and would not leave. I even yelled at my mom, the person who let him out the most, because
he loves it so much, he will be safe.
As much as I loved Tiger, I was always skeptical of his survival skills because his only benefit in the intelligence department was that he was not overburdened with an abundance of it. But I trusted my mom and I waited. By day 2, I was losing my mind. Night 3 was when my dad came inside after getting home from work. I was curious as to why he had taken so long, because I'd heard his car, squeaky brakes, like 15 minutes before, but I realized that he had come in holding Tiger. He never touched any cats. I think from the way they groomed themselves, he thought they were just always covered in their own spit. I did not even question it. My brother and I were overjoyed, and my mom asked where he found him. Dad, the woman across the street had him. Apparently the conversation a few days before had been an honest-to-God inquiry. She had somehow gotten him to come to her, probably with food, and then took him inside because she
needed him for the mice.
But hey, she was apparently planning on giving him back once he took care of her issue. Luckily, it had been garbage day, so when the lady opened her front door, Tiger effing booked it across the street, and the only reason Dad was carrying him was because this woman was chasing after him because he was not done with the mice. I don't remember if he repeated much of the dialogue that must have been exchanged, but I do remember him saying he told her, "The only thing more stupid than this cat is you." And honestly, I believe him. Well, to be honest guys, that turned out much better than I would have expected. And that reminds me, maybe half a year ago or so, I think I was in the car with my girlfriend and I was saying like, "Oh look, there's a very cute cat on the side of the road." Then my girlfriend parked the car and we took a closer look, and as it turned out, the cat had just eaten a mouse or something and her whole mouth was bloody. And there were like bits and pieces of meat hanging off her mouth. I love cats, but that was really a horror moment if you ask me. But I guess that is just the reality of outdoor cats. And the last one is titled EM calls the cops on me for trespassing on my own land, gets evicted. The cast is me, EM typical entitled cow, Frank, unlucky neighbor, previously UN before the edit, the owner of EM's house and the father of EM's baby daddy. Grandfather, an 83-year-old farmer who takes no crap, and cops number 1, 2 and 3. Backstory: for most of my life I was raised by my grandfather. Nothing was wrong with my family life or anything, just a few sets of circumstances. That's a whole other story in itself. We live in a suburban area surrounded by woods, and he owns about 10 acres into the woods with the boundaries clearly marked by stone walls. One of these stone walls separated my grandfather's land from a cul-de-sac, and up until now we've had zero problems with any of them. In fact, my grandfather was usually more than happy to give permission to neighbors who politely asked him to use his land given they had a good reason. One of these neighbors had asked my grandfather if he could dump the sticks and leaves in his yard over the stone wall. My grandfather agreed, as he rarely uses that part of the property anyway. This will be important later. My grandfather is very healthy for his age and still strong as an ox. That being said, he has a few minor health issues, including vertigo spells, so I've been trying to help him around the yard more and more, so as well as just to stay active outside away from crowds with this virus going around. Recently, I've started the project of cleaning up the underbrush around the wooded area. A large pine had fallen a few months before and almost hit one of the porches in the cul-de-sac. My grandfather cut up the tree and removed the pieces in the neighbor's yard, but it was too deep in the woods to pull them out with the tractor. This led to me going back to that pine tree and trying to clear a path back to the house from there. I was behind the stone wall cutting and pulling up saplings when I hear the glass door of the cul-de-sac house open and an angry lady storming out onto the porch in a bathrobe. She was much younger than a typical Karen, I would say mid-20s. EM.
What are you doing here? You cannot be here.
Me, why not? EM.
Because you're trespassing, dumbass. You think you can just hang out in the woods behind my house with my kids inside? Get the F out of here before I call the cops.
At this point, I'm just looking at her, trying to figure out what to say. I mean, I get it. It can be a little weird seeing someone in the woods behind your house if you haven't seen them before. Me? Ma'am, I'm sorry if I scared you, but my family owns this part of the woods. I'm just cleaning up back here. Remember, me and my grandfather were back here a few months back to take care of that tree that fell down. I just need to clear a path so we can get it out of here. At this point, I thought it was purely a misunderstanding. EM.
Don't be ridiculous. Those were laborers my boyfriend's dad hired. You don't own the land. My boyfriend's dad owns all of this.
Gestures with her hand.
Now I tell you one more time to get out before I call the cops.
Now I am thinking I might be dealing with a genuine idiot, as outside our property boundaries, the woods are owned by the town water plant and don't have public access. But I am also taken aback that she referred to us as laborers. Me. Guess you're going to have to call the cops then, because I ain't moving. I don't care what you, your boyfriend, or your boyfriend's dad says. I shrug as I lean back against the wall and pull out my phone to call my grandfather to tell him where I was. He tells me he will be there in a few minutes and to hang tight. She then dramatically proceeds to call 911 and tells them there is a shady individual on her property refusing to leave and she's afraid for her life. I start getting nervous at this point, even though all I have on me is a hooked branch cutter. So I call up the police non-emergency number, briefly explain the situation as just a land dispute that got out of hand and that I am unarmed and waiting on my own property and that I have never left my own property. He assured me that it would be settled when the officers arrive, which did not help my nerves. Just then I hear my grandfather pull up and see him walking through the yard towards us. EM.
What? Stay back, you cannot come in my yard.
Grandfather growls, "Keep your mouth shut, you dumb broad." He growled as he walked over to me and climbed over the wall so he was on my side. Grandfather, "Now who the hell do you think you are? And why are you yelling at my granddaughter?" EM.
My boyfriend's dad owns all this, and both of you are going to get arrested for trespassing.
My grandfather let out a dramatic, indignant laugh. Grandfather, "Oh, did he tell you that? Well, you're in for quite the shock, and your boyfriend's dad is in for quite the talk." After them yelling back and forth for a few minutes, 2 cop cars pull up and 3 officers come walking into the yard. As soon as they do, she starts screaming again about how we have no right to be in the woods behind her house where
we can see her kids inside.
Cop number 1 looks to G. "Sir, do you own the property behind this wall?" Grandfather, "Yes sir, I do." Pulls out his wallet to show his address. Cop eyeing his license, "Sir, this address is for down the street." Me, "Correct, but if you look on Google Maps, it shows the property boundaries of that address reach out through the woods and end at this wall." I hand him my phone, which already has Google Maps open, showing our exact location within the boundary of the property. Cop number 2, "Yep, she's right. So what were you all doing back here if you don't mind me asking?" We explained the situation of the tree and how we were working to remove the remnants. Meanwhile, the other officer was taking a statement from EM. Grandfather: I know the owner of this house. He's a good guy. I give him permission to dump his leaves and stuff behind the wall, but I've never seen her before, so I don't know where she got those crazy ideas. But I'm definitely going to have a talk with Frank when he gets home. Cop number 1: She already called him up and he's on his way now. Do you mind sticking around for a little until he gets here? Grandfather: Sure, we got nothing to do. The cops walked us to my grandfather's truck, where we waited about 10 minutes for Frank to pull in. When he did, he immediately walked over to the truck. Frank, grandfather's first name: OP, what's going on? Someone was hiding out in the woods? Are you okay? Did you see him? To clarify, we've had an issue in the past with people running from cops and hiding in our woods. It took a second for us to realize he thought that maybe EM saw one and we came to chase him out. Me? Not exactly. At this point 2 cops are around us again, but being 2 old guys who obviously pose zero threat, they are noticeably relaxed and kind of let them talk it out. Frank explains that EM is his granddaughter's mother and his son had made some mistakes and currently both were staying with him while they tried to find a place of their own. He thinks maybe his son told some lies to make him look better. Grandfather: Well, I hate to say it, but your son made some big mistakes. She's crazy. Frank: Oh, you have no idea. The other cop is still talking to EM, who won't stop screaming about not wanting us being able to see into the living room, especially my grandfather.
Creepy old man.
My blood is boiling at this point. My grandpa is the type of person who would gladly throw his life away to save a child, any child, even a stranger's. Frank heard this too and ordered EM inside at once. He told the cops he needed to have a talk with both her and his son about their living situation, but they might want to remain nearby in case she tries to call again for whatever reason. Me and my grandfather are given the clear to go but leave our contact information. Found out later that week that EM was getting evicted for a number of reasons, with this little incident being the last straw. He's also filing for custody of his granddaughter because EM refuses to get a job yet still has money for weed, yet keeps asking Frank for money to take care of his granddaughter. I really feel bad for her in this situation, but I have no sympathy for EM whatsoever. Entitlement at its best. And ripe stars, with this we have reached the end of the video. However, if you still cannot get enough of my content, then I would highly suggest to check out my endless binge watch playlist, which will soon show up in the left corner of the screen. In addition, I would really appreciate it if you could not only subscribe to the channel but also turn on the bell notifications, which you can do by clicking on the little bell icon right next to the subscribe button. This will help my channel tremendously and this will make sure that you don't miss any of my videos. Furthermore, if you want to see additional ripe content that I don't post on YouTube, then I would suggest to head on over to patreon.com/ripeyoutube for more than 50 exclusive videos that you will not see anywhere else. Thank you so much for your amazing daily support and I hope to see you again tomorrow.